Thank you very much. I hope everyone's put on their cameras and their mics. Jayesh, Biren, and Ashish. Ashish, are you around? Okay, if Ashish is not around, I'll begin straight away with Jayesh. And as they join, then we'll continue with them. So Jayesh, I mean, why did you all look at the AVG sector as a sector that you all would really like to promote for Telangana?
Yeah, so first of all, good afternoon, Anil. Good afternoon, fellow panelists, all the participants, attendees. So let me go back a little bit in history. I'm sure everyone will know that Telangana is a new state which got created in 2014, June 2014, roughly about 7.5 years ago. And because we were a new state, we were given the complete freedom that you can identify your priorities, you can set new policies. Nothing of the past should tie you down. There are no legacies. You should look at everything with a clean slate, so to say. So I was the IT secretary then also, as I am now. And what we did was that we decided to understand what exactly have been the strengths of Hyderabad, but which way is the world moving? I mean, it's good to know what your strengths are, but you should also keep up with the global trends, what is the projection for the future, and so on and so forth. So when we were designing our IT policy in 2014, we got to know, of course, not that it was a big secret or anything, but we did get a very good understanding that Hyderabad has a reasonably sized AVCG industry with a huge potential to grow. I mean, they were not making big time news at that time in 2014, etc. But the critical mass, as they say, that there are at least 40, 50 companies. There are some founders who are very bullish about this sector. They want to get the sector move forward. In those days, if people will recall, Bangalore was the biggest AVCG center in the country, which it still remains, no doubt about it. And Bombay was the second largest. Bombay, Pune put together, so to say. That cluster was the second largest. Hyderabad was also there somewhere. Not to say that Hyderabad was nowhere, but...
No, but you can't forget you've got Green Gold, which has emerged, which is actually the bellwether for the animation industry. From
No, agreed. So that's what I said. When I meant that there are some founders who were very kind of prominent, who were bullish, I meant the Green Gold folks, Rajiv in particular, and there were a couple of others as well. So at that time, when we were writing the new policy, we felt that this will be one sector which we must focus. We should not let go of this opportunity. And after the umbrella IT policy came into being, we had also decided that while the policy will be a very intense policy which will show our aspirations, our intents, but the nuts and bolts of what exactly will the government do will come out in the form of sectoral policies. And I can recall now, 6 years ago, the first sectoral policy that we brought out, actually two policies that we brought out together, more or less. One was on cyber security and one was on the AVCG industry. So since 2016, so to say, 6 years have now gone by, our focus has remained on this sector. And I would encourage participants and others to read that our image policy. While the rest of you call it AVCG, we call it image.
AVGC.
Yeah, you call it AVGC, we call it image. Of course, the acronyms are the same. G stands for the same G that you have, C stands for the same, but we have just played it around so that it is easy to pronounce. We call it image. So if you read our image policy, first of all, it was prepared after extensive consultation. See, normally government policies, there is one criticism that they're very, they are all over the place. They are very motherhood kind of statements, and they are written in good English. They are printed on good glossy paper, but nothing makes sense beyond that. I mean, what exactly will you do? What does the government commit? What else will be the role of other stakeholders? That kind of clarity doesn't emerge. But our policy is very different. We have actually done a very bottoms-up kind of an exercise to understand from the ground what the realities are, what are the difficulties companies face, and so on and so forth. And
you were late to the party, right, compared to even Karnataka?
Karnataka, my guess is that their policy came after ours.
Oh, okay, but they were earlier than you all in voicing their intent.
Perhaps. Maharashtra also came later, and thereafter a few other states have done that. But see, the difference is that I don't want to run down any state. And I can tell you about my state, Telangana, that the way we approach this, see, if you read our policy document, every sentence is attempting to solve a pressing need or a requirement of the industry. So if the industry, for example, of course, I know that you have been to Hyderabad.
No, I've also read your policy, but I'm just going to be asking questions so that other people who have not read become clearer about what you're offering.
No. So the point which I was making was that since you are familiar with Hyderabad,
you
will know that most of the action in Hyderabad happens in an area, in an enclave, which is called Cyberabad.
Sure.
That is where all the, all these large IT firms, all the knowledge industries, the institutions like the ISB, Triple IT, all these people are located. See, the AVCG industry in Hyderabad, now things have changed slightly, but in those days, in 2014, 2015, etc., while there were behemoths like Green Gold, etc., on one side, but it was largely made up of mid-scale companies. I mean, I can say that almost 85% of the composition of the AVGC landscape in Hyderabad or the image landscape in Hyderabad was of mid-scale companies. And when we were doing our consultations, one of the questions which we had asking them, what are your pain points which the government can help alleviate? One of the things which everyone was telling, that we want to be in Cyberabad because this is the happening place, this is where the action is. But as you would imagine, since you live in Bombay and of other big cities also, real estate also responds to that dynamic. So if everyone is going to one space, real estate prices go up. So the mid-scale companies were finding it very difficult to acquire space in Cyberabad because of the heavy cost, and therefore they were forced to have their offices, let us say, in Panchagutta or Begumpet or Sikandrabad or Amirpet and so on and so forth. So when we started writing our policy, this is one decision which we took, and it's a very bold decision. We took a decision that we will create highest quality space in Cyberabad, in the heart of Cyberabad, and make it available to image companies or AVGC companies literally at throwaway prices. And I'm sure you know of this, that we are building not some 1 lakh square feet or 2 lakh square feet, 14 lakh square feet. I mean, 1.4 million square feet facility is being built. And unfortunately, COVID has pushed back the construction.
This is the image tower you're talking about.
Yeah, image tower. So, I mean, I don't think any other government would be spending so much of money. I mean, they may have great policies, they may have early starts, but we are the only ones who are putting our money where our mouth is. I mean, I can tell you for sure that all amounts put together, let us say by a Karnataka or a Maharashtra or a Tamil Nadu or anyone, UP, for example, is claiming to do big things. What they are doing together also will be less than 1/3 of the amount that we are spending on that kind of facility. So every sentence of our policy is like that. It addresses a real issue. And
what is the need? What is the need behind, let's say, the VFX industry? Why should a government focus on that sector too much more? Is it the employment factor? Is it the talent factor which is available in Telangana? Or is it the fact that there is enterprise which is encouraging this?
So it's a mix of all of that. See, when I told you that in 2014, when the state became a new state, we were given the freedom. I mean, it was like writing on a clean slate that you pick your priorities. Mm-hmm. So when we were picking out the sectors where we can potentially raise Hyderabad to the top of not just this country, but to the top of the world, this sector figured quite prominently for 3 reasons. One, there was already a presence of that sector. So it's not that we were starting from the scratch. No. You yourself mentioned that Green Gold, etc. They were there. There were many other.
There was DQ and animation.
Yeah.
At that stage.
There were at least 70, 80 companies. Yeah. But as I said, most of them were mid-scale companies. So their kind of growth was not happening in a very prominent way. They were more or less stuck in that a small industry, a mid-scale industry kind of thing. While Green Golds and all, they were looking ahead. Second was that some element of skilling was also happening because of the presence of these companies. There were a few players who had come, who had set up their training institutes, training academies, etc. And some basic level of entry kind of skilling was happening. Third thing, which also gave us a very good sense of optimism, was that while the industry was small, it was already having global footprints. So many of the studios here, they were getting work from abroad, from studios of the West, and they were delivering. So internationally also, there was some recognition that quality work happens in Hyderabad. There were some studios which had even won awards. In fact, before 2014 also. Some of you may recall there was a great movie which had huge amounts of animation and VFX called Avatar. And lots of that Avatar work was handled by Hyderabad-based studio. So that reputation was there, and so on and so forth. And of course, the employment factor is also important, because when we are looking at the regular IT industry, as you would also know, the regular IT industry is biased towards, now it is slightly gradually shifting, because things like data annotation and all those kind of skills are also coming. But other than that, the IT industry is typically biased towards people who have a BTech degree or a BCA or an MCA, who have studied in a college, who speak some amount of English. So obviously, I mean, let us say someone else is there who did not go to college. He had to drop out because of family circumstances, etc. At grade 12th itself, he's in a rural or a semi-rural kind of a scenario. So we found that this is one sector which has the flexibility, or the range rather, to absorb all kinds of jobs. So for multiple reasons. And then we felt that while we knew that Bangalore is the biggest in the country at that point in time, we also got a sense after talking to industry leaders, etc., and domain experts, that it is not that India is defined by Bangalore. I mean, there is enough space for other centers also to emerge. So it is not to say that if you go to Hollywood and try to get some work, if you're not from Bangalore, no one will even talk to you. So that was not the scenario. So it was still appearing to be a democratic place. If you have talent, if you give the push, things will happen. So these are a combination of factors, Anil.
Yeah.
Because of this government took, and I can also tell you that in hindsight, now that 6 years have gone by, the effort which the government has poured, the interest that we have taken, all that has been proven right by some very amazing initial results, encouraging results that we have seen so far.
We'll come to the results later. Now let's go back to industry, to Ashish and Biren, who are here, who are both representing National Association and wings which are really encouraging Avgc. So Ashish, what is the importance of government support in this sector? How important is it?
See, the fact is that the particular vertical within the industry requires an hand-holding because of very critical small issues that industry faces. And like Jayesh Ranjan Garu talked about the skilling aspect, for example. Now, the skilling has to really go to the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities as well. It's not that we need to really develop something which is, a city or a metropolitan area. The reason being that we are an industry which is based on the creative talent. The basic requirement to be in our industry is about creative arts, performing arts, design, and the writing skills and few other things. Now, these skills are in ample in the rural areas. They have original thinking. The urbanization actually kills many of these original thinking mechanisms because it structures your mind in a very different way. And that's why you will see all the reality shows of skills. The best of the talent come from the rural areas because they are very raw, they're rustic, they can contribute to a great extent. Now, how do you really encourage? Because people will have to, at the end of the day, to find their space into the industry or to make a name into the industry, they have to come to this place. And that's why that journey has to be smoothened out. And that's where you require a government intervention. Second is that it's a reality that when India became independent and we had set up our education policy, we wanted to become an industrial nation, and it's not too far back. It's just about 75 years, but we actually set English, maths, botany, zoology, physics, chemistry, biology, history, geography, civics, and economics as top 10 subjects. We forgot about creativity, performing arts, and design and sports, which actually is a very significant a balancing factor, and it's a parallel level playing field for most of the people. And we say that, being literate alone in this country is not enough. If you're not literate and creative at the same time, you will still struggle for your livelihood. So what does this industry really brings about? It brings about a balance. It brings about a power to the soft power that is created in the country. And it also brings about an unique storytelling feature that the industry really requires. And that's why the government intervention is critical, because you need spaces at a different cost. You constantly get compared with the IT industry, but not to forget that when IT happened, the IITs were already there, the private engineering colleges were already there, and the whole force was already there. But then when our industry has built 106 years of history, and we became the largest number of film making country in the world, we still didn't have educational institutions formally supporting it. And that's why the intervention is required. Second is that the IT might be able to afford 100 rupees a square feet to 200 to 300 rupees a square feet space, or maybe some of the multinationals who come to India can afford that kind of a per square feet rate. But then if the industry is more entrepreneurial and people will have to make original content or to provide a service from a smaller budgets, you need to really support these people to enable those businesses at the right thing. And that's why what has happened in Telangana and what kind of rates they're going to get the space at a very prime location like Hyderabad is a unique offering through the policy. And I think that's where you bring about a level playing field for the international deliveries as well. So much so, I must tell you, in Madhya Pradesh, we brought in around 7 companies from outside right now. And we just formed an association. We are designing the policy. They have offered 17 rupees and 18 rupees a square feet in the IT park, which are a government IT park. Now, you tell me which place you would find a talent and a world-class facility with internet connectivity and electricity in a setting where you get 17 rupees a square feet. So I think that's something that a policy intervention can do, because any sector that gets focused, you have a 360 approach. Of course, it purely depends on what is the political will of that state and how the IS officers of that state implement it. Because you can write a great policy, but whether you have an ability to implement that in the right frame is also a critical factor. And in fact, the stars were better aligned for Telangana as a state, where the leadership was really, really good. They were open to listen to the industry. And Jayesh Ranjan Garu was there for 7 years constantly. This doesn't happen, by the way.
I know bureaucrats get transferred all the time.
Absolutely. And, in the central government, we had dealt with 7 IS officers, 7 secretaries and 5 ministers in the last 5 years. So it's a very critical thing that you also have a.
I'll ask him why he stayed on in that position when he could have gone elsewhere after this. But let's Biren have his say also.
Yeah.
Biren, why does this industry need government intervention? Ashish addressed some of the issues. What's your perspective on this?
So first of all, great pleasure to be here. Jayesh ji, Ashish, Anil, really good to be on this panel, and great to be back.
My apologies if we went a little wrong on the time. My apologies, Biren.
It's okay. We are at VAM, and I think the industry is going VAM, BAM, and we are at VAM, so it's all good, right?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to start by saying that I think industry follows opportunity. And if we look at what's going on around us, the things have changed very rapidly. In fact, I'm wondering whether any policy can last more than 2 years, because a policy has to be a living document. And I think we've touched upon the fact that, to my mind, a policy is only as good as the ability of stakeholders to harvest the value from its issuance.
Okay.
So Mr. Ranjan, has issued a great policy. Karnataka has issued a great policy. Ashish and all of us are driving policies in many states. But a policy can remain on a shelf and it will say that 20 things have to be done. But beyond that, I think it needs for the stakeholders, right, from academia, from industry, etc., to be able to leverage that. So this is very important. And I think the other part is that, so I came back right now from the grand finale of the Elevate program. It's the third program in Karnataka, where we give 100 companies across the sector up to 50 lakhs of rupees. And this is the third time it's happening in 3.5 years. And from those 11 companies, I can't say what's going to happen because the final investment committee will meet. But on an average, 4 to 6 companies get funded. Now, these are green shoots, and that happens as well. There's also, I'm part of the investment committee of Kitwin, which has had its 4th fund in the last 10 years, the first 3 being in the IT sector. So they have great traction and understanding how to. So ultimately, you can have an intention, but you must also have a wallet. Because having an intention without a wallet doesn't work. When we do an Indo-Canadian co-production treaty between 2 countries, they have the television fund in Canada, right? We don't have something that enables the Indian.
We'll come to the co-production treaties.
So,
yeah.
So there is something in that. No, I think what we really have to ask ourselves is the following questions, right? Number one is that, when we are creating these policies, I think we need to dovetail a national policy and state policies. The comparative nature between states is very helpful, and will really, but we should and we can create a string of pearls. So instead of all states having similar policies, there can be different accents brought out between, say, West Bengal and Telangana and Maharashtra and Punjab, etc., where each of them are creating something that can be complementary for the country as a whole. And I think that grand strategy should ideally come from the national policy, which, as the chair of CII, we have made recommendations, as have Ashish and FICCI and many others from time to time. And I think that's beginning to see the light of day with the announcements that just took place in the budget, as well as from the Prime Minister in the webinar that we conducted a couple of days ago. And I think, therefore, it's really important from our point of view to see how to create a network effect. Any country, whether it is UK or whether it is Korea or whether it is Canada, has been able to create a network effect by cross-connecting independent entities in TV, OTT, games, design, academia, media, people like yourself and the platforms that you have for the industry. These need to have a very deliberate and strategic interconnection in order to leverage something that becomes a statement of intention. So I think that's something. And then I think we've touched upon this, but what is education versus skilling? What are products versus services? What is ownership versus management? What are funds versus grants, right? And how synergy happens. Synergy never happens on its own. Synergy happens when people in this call and others, they remove the barriers that come in the way of creating synergy. Synergy happens on its own. So all we are doing is taking out the impediments, the things where people get stuck. I'm actually quite optimistic that if we don't do anything, the visual effects industry will grow immensely as it has grown in the past. And why do I say that? If you look at one thing, and Anil, you're very involved in that sector. If you look at the OTT sector, right? If you look at the OTT sector, it has put in something in the region of, I was told, $665 million into fresh content in India just in the last year, right? And 380 of that came from the four players, not to mention the fact that the Indian players, right, the Z5s and so on and so forth, the Voot and the MX player have done extremely well. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you look at it, if I take a conservative 15%, and by the way, many of those productions have more than 15% of their budget as VFX, but at a conservative 15%, it means that we had a huge 1,000 crores of revenue around OTT in the last year. And the number, of course, there's no database to confirm that, but it's not difficult to extrapolate that number. And we've always associated VFX with the big tentpole movies with thousands of shots, right? The robots and the Bahubalis and the Ra ones. And of course, there are many, many more being made. But don't forget that the revenue of film in our country is 9% of our total M&E, right? Whereas television is 55%, and I haven't taken the television figure into my calculation so far. I'm only talking of the OTT. And if the trajectory that everyone puts together goes its direction, we will be at 1.15 billion within the next 7 to 9 years. So, I mean, the visual effects industry requires, therefore, a very different emphasis. So we've got the demand side well organized because it's there, right? And I'm not even getting into the international work and all of that stuff, which is 75% of the industry already. But where I'm coming from is that when we talk about skilling, education is great. And I think we've spoken about that at great length in our national webinar a couple of days ago, and talked about how things can happen with the MESC and many others from the school level and the UG level and so on and so forth. But today's need, and we'll miss the bus if it doesn't happen, is skilling, because that's really where, as we said, the studio that I run is 6,000 people that got paid last month, right? Now, in this, many of these people have really come from all over the country in tier 2 and tier 3 towns. And imagine that with the disruption of the pandemic, we've also figured out ways by which we can create several hub and spoke models. So, for example, the wonderful image star that Jayesh Ranjan Garuji is creating was supposed to be a destination, but now it can be just a hub, and it can actually service many places much further than its original intention, right? So these are the changes that are coming about. And as you probably know, Anil, we have created here a 32 crores have gone into putting up the Center of Excellence in Bangalore, which is a great test bed for what we'd like to do in other locations as well. And what is it? If I was to simplify it for this audience, creating a center like that should act as a WeWorks for media, as a WeWorks for content creation. Because when people are small startups and they're 4-people teams and 20-people teams, they need to go somewhere, plug and play, and not worry about data centers, storage, render, networking, connectivity, right? So this is not new to IT. NASCOM 10K has done this, and there are many other. Microsoft has incubators, Cisco has something, Accenture has something or the other. In our industry, we need a bespoke method where government, industry, and academia can come together. What is the government's role? To the question of this topic for this afternoon, the government has to do the heavy lifting of building the roads. We in industry and the citizens will buy the cars, drive on it, and make business for ourselves and for the country, right? So the heavy lifting is, how do you build roads? Those are the expensive things that need to be done. So there are proposals that have been provided by us even last year, from CII across broadcasting and AVGC and all sectors. Can we look at media and entertainment as an infrastructure industry? At one level, that's what you require. And if that can happen in 10 or 15 cities, where you create the basic enabling infrastructure, then what happens is that people can come and play on that platform. And I think that's what digital brings to you. So I'll pause here because I think...
You still haven't answered my question.
Yeah.
Why do we need to give a special hand-holding for the AVGC sector? That hasn't been answered really, because I believe in India, I believe most other countries have used, soft power to build economies, whether it's the US, which has used soft power, whether it's Korea. So that's one of the reasons I believe that this sector we can rapidly grow it, and hence, build a soft power. One of the main reasons is that. And
so basically, I think we touched upon the fact that the proposal that we are now at an advanced level in discussion with the MIB and other ministries in Delhi for the National Center of Excellence, which will become one of the first tasks of the AVGC, National AVGC Task Force, will be to provide that platform, of global and local engagement in order for skills beyond education, skills, infra, incubation, acceleration to take place. That cannot be done by a private industry. The Abu Dhabi Media City did not work because they just took an IT park kind of building and said, now you can have a media city here. And Cartoon Network went there and they just found that once they produced things, nothing could happen with it because it didn't have the robust nature of what requires to be done, right? I sit in 13 floors of a big IT park in Bangalore, and we have to draw an electricity line, which costs us 1.1 crore per building from the nearest substation, which a small company cannot afford. That is what I mean by road building. That is where the government needs to come in, because that cannot be afforded even by a large company. So there are things that are infrastructure related. We do need the government for that. We've also been able to get the government to now recognize that we need to have access to global markets. There is an active conversation with Annecy for June. We've talked about FMX being for visual effects, the absolute place to go, the GDC for games, and obviously Cannes for, you know, the MIPCOMs and the MIP TVs and so on and so forth for content and so on and so on. So I think there are different directions that the government can support us with. Number one, there is the SEPC, which is Ministry of Commerce and Industry, talking about software exports, right? There is people now in skills development and entrepreneurship talking about what I think, you know, Ashish is referring to and has done so much work on, right? There are people in the MIghty, which is taking the software technology park infrastructure in 15 cities in India, out of which 5 centers of excellence are Avgc. In Guwahati, in Shillong, in Imphal, in Jayesh ji knows, I mean, he's supporting the one in games in Hyderabad, right? So there are many things at play here where the government has to take the heavy lifting and allow the industry and startups and entrepreneurs to really dance on that platform that they create. They build the roads, we drive on it and make business happen. I think that's the answer to your question.
Thank you very much. So Ashish,
Biren, just sorry, Anil, what Biren was saying is that we look at the future, but look at the history also. Just about 10 years ago, if any filmmaker wanted any visual effects, or even ad filmmakers, they never used to believe that India could.
Bangkok, Singapore, wherever.
Absolutely. They never believed that India could deliver. Today, the world thinks that India can deliver, and India is constantly delivering. You look at the credit of any movie whatsoever, which comes from maybe Japan, or which comes from Korea, or which comes from US, you will find some of the Indian names to be there. And I think that's something that industry has very strongly pushed. But the thing is, if this movement had not happened from the industry and with the support of the government, we would have still been looking at these skills from outside. So that situation has drastically changed. Second thing is that the national AVGC policy that we have recommended 2 years ago, which is doing rounds with Niti Aayog and other ministries as well. Every single aspect of it has been well thought of, keeping in mind that we want to become a superpower in this space by 2030. We require 20 lakh workforce on the core level, which is the direct employment. Indirect employment is more than that. From 1% of global market share to be 5 to 6% of a global market share in next 10 years of the enhanced ratio that is going to be there, which will be around 70 to 80 billion dollars. All these calculations need a lot of time. And then at every level, the government needs to be sensitized that this is the opportunity. And then there has to be a state and center link. At the same time, you look at our counterparts in the gaming industry. See, animation requires, because we are creating IP. VFX is a services industry. More the live action would go on, more the use of VFX is going to happen. But the challenge here is that whether so far we have been struggling to move the live action into smaller cities. We have been concentrating only on the big cities. Whether the VFX can move on to the other cities and still support from there. Now, these were the aspects which needed to be discussed with the industry, with the government, and that policy needed to be drawn. Look at our counterparts in the gaming industry. They are struggling because the skill versus chance is an issue. And that's why we require a policy to intervene, that, when there is a B2C approach, what happens? When it is a B2B approach, what happens? And that sensitization has to happen at every single level, because the industry suffers if that is not framed properly. Like you've seen the example of co-productions. Because we didn't have a framework, how much, every market that you used to take us, Anil, people didn't even talk to us because we didn't have a treaty. Now you have a treaty, people are talking to us, but the issue is that whether we have a support. Now that needs to come through an intervention of a policy, and it will come very slowly. Then we require a umbrella policy at a central level, and also followed by a policy which will support a cluster, because the cluster will have to happen in the cities which is under the states. It cannot happen in the center. So there has to be a correlation to that, and the cluster formation would give an access to every single talent pool within the AVGC and XR space to make sure that we are able to penetrate. And luckily, with the COVID situation, when our people went back to their small villages and started delivering from there, we have discovered everything entirely new. Today, when we talk to the government, we say a small place like Sagar in Madhya Pradesh, or go to Cuttack in Orissa, or you go to Assam, or you go to Tinsukia, even Tripura. There are studios. We have opened studios in 5 cities in Maharashtra, like Amravati, Nagpur, Kolhapur, and all, because the population of these kids who have an experience have gone back to those places. And now we need to develop that infrastructure into that area. And that's why media and entertainment at large needs an entertainment infrastructure kind of process. But more than that, AVGC requires a very strong one, because the delivery in this space can happen from smaller places as well. And that's why the intervention is very critical. And when Biren says that we want them to build roads, it's true, because if those people can be in those small places, the cost of living for artists is great. The access to the rural artist is really great. And then just to enable them to deliver from there brings in so much of comfort, and the quality of delivery increases. The cost every film or every delivery is as good as its cost. And if you're able to continue to have that cost arbitrage for extended period of time, then you are a winner. And more people coming in can refine that, so that the value chain is not only to go from services to creating IP, but also to go from the quality for every artist, that if they are working on a small television show, next their ambition is to become an artist on the feature film and the OTT, and look at the parameter of the quality increasing. So all these things becomes possible when you have a surrounding of a policy and intervention at every level.
And can I just step and see? A lot of the countries like France, they've got the infrastructure in place. Now the various provinces are providing tax incentives, or they are offering funding, or they are offering grants or subsidies. So should that be in the next phase, or should it be now?
There are 2 ways of looking at it. When we spoke to government, about bringing reservation on, giving an channel kids license, whether they should produce 80% of the Indian content. That time the government said that we are bringing in a process of liberalization. So by putting a condition, it would hamper the liberalization process. On one hand, it might be right, but on the other hand, it's actually affecting our country, and it depriving our kids of having the culture, relevance. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Now, when your country has a lot of other priorities, and country says that we would like to get out of subsidies, to propose a subsidy at this point in time becomes an issue, when the government is having a clear agenda of getting out of the subsidy. So we need to find ways and means as to how do we actually have a collaborative model. So in the national education policy that we have done, that we had also suggested, everything that you're seeing is already happening right now, including the promotion council that would come in. The task force is already announced. But the challenge is that we also have proposed very critical things where a central fund can be created in terms of if 1,000 crores or 2,000 crores or 5,000 crores can be set aside with the center, and they say that the state can match the fund. So they can unlock this fund by 2,000 crores and see if Telangana wants to put another 2,000 crores, then it becomes a 4,000 crores for investment into that state. And that's where even a private fund can join into that with the same equity. So a bigger fund can actually become more usable directly. So we have created a fund of funds into our proposition, which can bring in a private partnership, which can bring in a state center partnership, so that you can unlock it in a very different way. And you can actually have the IDBI Bank or SIDBI to also look at monitoring this kind of a fund. So then you have proposed something very different, which can actually be useful for the industry.
Okay, can we move on to Biren now? Because Biren and Jayesh have been quiet for some time now. Let them also come in and deliberate on what you've just said. Yeah, Biren, would you like to step in, and then Jayesh can come?
So Anil, I think there are 2 or 3 parallel tracks that go on. I think all of us, we need to keep the wheels, the engine moving forward. We need to make plans that things will go a certain way with the government intervention and funding. And then we also need to know that if things like COVID, etc., have come about and the funds get diverted, we shouldn't be left behind. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be, trying to go from 1 or 2% of the world market to a higher level. So I do think that there are 3 things at play here, and people struggle with it. We are talking about the craft, right? It's both art and science in the production of, say visual effects, although it affects the larger industry because that's the conference. We're talking about technology, which is a wind in the sails, right? There are a lot of things that have been disrupted in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think, Anil, on other forums at Animation Express, we've talked about, and I think tomorrow is a day on technology. And we will hear from people in technology, how technology is making things in some ways faster, quicker, and better across all of the film and television industries. Our conventional industries are being influenced and benefited by the new tools that are coming out, right? I think we've got sessions by Epic tomorrow that ran a fantastic contest across 14 studios in India, which are being featured tomorrow. And all that is to seed the new ideas of where you needed hundreds of technicians, hundreds of camera people, different locations, going to 7, 8 places. Today, with the world that got disrupted, technology can still do that for you, right? Beyond the camera. So that's the art and craft side, that's the technology side. Then the other part that is really important, and I think that's where the IP story is very important, is the commerce and the business side of it. Many people who are in the arts and many people who are technology don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the mentoring, they don't have the ability to go out into the world and make sure that they look out to see what they should do in terms of honing their craft and their IP and making it happen. So that third part is also really critical. And many places that you see in other industries, if you take the ESDM industry, the electronics and industry here, or you take the semiconductor industry, you take the IT industry, they took a long time, by the way, to move from services to products, right? And it's beginning to happen.
The IT industry still hasn't moved towards products. We've got barely 3 or 4 products in the IT industry.
Fair enough, but there is a concerted effort with states as well as industry and are working together to make happen. And we need to do that because we are a much younger industry, right? We are lagging them by 5 or 7 or 10 years. What they do 10 years back, we are doing today. What they do today, we will do hopefully faster in 3 or 4 or 5 years. And that is, I think, where these circles, these 3 concentric circles of the arts and sciences, the technology enablement, and the business side of it. So where should we put our money? If we were to be today investors and not people who are participants in the industry, we would put our money where we think we can have the fastest return. And that's where I'm suggesting that the government has the ability, like the project of the image tower, right? And others. You bring other people into this fold and create it. If one of the people that did this most successfully, Anil, as you know very well, and you've met them for many years, is KOKA in Korea, where they actually made sure that at a provincial level, they created enabling infrastructure. And I've been seeing on the chat that people are saying, hey, infrastructure already exists, but I'm not talking about just broadband. I'm talking about customized spaces that people can come and play in. So today, if someone wants to start in Bangalore at the 30,000 square foot place that we built, they pay 5,000 rupees a seat. Some of the people who are founded the company I sit in today are a startup. They have 40 seats there now, right? Those guys have got 40 seats now for the last 8 months. They started with 10, it's gone to 40. They pay a certain amount of money for the render capacity that they use, and they don't have to buy their data center. So they have no capex. They've had no capital expenditure. They've focused on it. They're doing projects with large companies like Lego, etc. abroad, and making their own IP, and have satellites in Kerala. They have satellites in Hubli, And that's the new world that we're talking about. So I think that, Ashish talked about this, and we've spoken about, Ashish was talking about how a park that is being built in central India, one of the buildings would become an Avgc tower, which would be customized for that. He talked about the fact that there were many splintered companies around that today have to carry a hard disk to a central location to make something happen. Now, that is the infrastructure we are talking about, right? So if we were to work together as leaders, as thought leaders for this, and bring those impediments to state governments in different areas, which we, there are 1 and 2 and 5 people doing, but we need a much larger momentum around that, and the media can definitely help. Then what we can do is to actually make sure that those people who are the cottage industry, if I might put that, can really become the SMEs and the startups of the future. So that really is the groundswell that I think we are trying to create with these initiatives and this conversation.
Okay, so Jayesh, Ranjan, Gadu, now it's your turn. As we would address you in Telangana.
See, I'll share some thoughts on few of the points which Ashish ji and Biren have spoken. So one is about the ways in which government can promote this sector. You framed one of your questions asking whether infrastructure should come first or subsidies should come first. So first of all, I would like to clarify. And again, whatever I speak based on hard 7.5 years of experience of Telangana. So I'm not speaking metaphorically or figuratively, etc. These are all experiential kind of insights that I'm giving. So one is that it's not an either or thing. In fact, ideally speaking, the government should move on all fronts if it is serious. And as I told you, if you're doing a bottoms-up exercise, if you understand what are the pain points, if your interest is to solve those pain points, respond to the pain points, that is the best that you can do as a government. So let us say if the pain point is that for, again, these small and mid-scale companies, as I told you, I alluded a while ago, that when we started taking interest in this sector, we found that it was largely a game of mid-scale and small companies. And therefore, some extra kind of support was needed for them, like the green golds and other big boys were able to take care of themselves, but it is this mid-scale and small companies who required assistance. So one, of course, is infrastructure I spoke about, and you know that the image tower is happening in Hyderabad. So the image tower is not just a piece of real estate. See, Ashish ji mentioned that somewhere you offer a seat at 17 rupees per square feet. In Bangalore, you offer at some 30 rupees per square feet, etc. But it is not just a real estate. Yeah. If that were so, I could have rented some huge tower from somewhere and offered it to companies at, say, X price or Y price. But we are also bringing in lots of common facilities. Again, that is something which we found to be extremely demand driven. Lots of companies told that, first of all, the real estate in Hyderabad is costly. And second, many of these studios, etc., they need to invest in larger real estate because they have to have their own render farm, they have to have their own motion capture facilities, and so on and so forth. And we felt that we can also make all these facilities available for everyone to use on a pay-per-use basis. So as a common infrastructure, as a common facility.
Similar to the Center of Excellence in Bangalore.
Yes. So if you look at the 1.4 million square feet that I'm talking about, I don't have precise recollection now, but my guess is that almost 30% of the space, or perhaps even more, is going for all these kinds of common facilities, including space for a world-class university to set up its, its training center or skilling center. So that is also provided. So that is one, that it is not a real estate play, but all kinds of facilities that you provide. The second very important thing is that mid-scale and small companies, just to level the field, they do need some financial incentives. Because let us say again, to give...
Can we have everyone else mute their mics, please? Because Jayesh is talking.
Yeah, sure. So, so let us say if they have to compete against the big boys of the world, they need some kind of support, some kind of affirmative action, as one calls them. So in Telangana also, in our policy, after lots of thought and deliberation, while we do not feel that policies, subsidies are the best instruments in a policy, we felt that providing at least the bare minimum, which creates that, which bridges that kind of gap between them and a bigger player, and that too for a limited period of time. I'm not addicting them lifelong on subsidies. Otherwise, they will just not, their own inclination or interest to really grow and rise will just not be, it will be stifled completely. So we offer in Telangana 4 kinds of financial incentives. So of course, when you come to the image tower, it will be taken care of. But so long as you are outside, we pay 25% of their rents. So if a AVCG company is occupying a private real estate, then I take the responsibility of reimbursing 1/4 of it. Similarly, we give them some power tariff benefits. So in Hyderabad, the commercial tariff as it is reasonable, but on that also you give them a 20% subsidy. Most important benefit which we give, which all of you also alluded to about products, is that if someone creates an IP, we completely bear the cost of the entire process of getting that IP, all the filing and all the fees and everything else that you need to do to get that IP in your name. All costs involved are paid for by the government. And if you, for instance, chose to locate your industry in a smaller location, in a tier 2 location. So in Telangana also, while Hyderabad is the face of our industry, but small companies, in fact, reasonably sized companies have also started going to places like Warangal and a few other places and have started doing good work. In fact, I was very pleasantly surprised when a Warangal based company made an animation film which did very well. It won awards on certain circuits, etc. So very heartwarming to know that not just these people are supporting jobs in a smaller town, but they're also doing high quality work. So that is the second thing. So it's not an either or kind of thing. But I completely agree when Biren ji and Ashish mentioned about skilling, because that is one area where, so for instance, we are all talking about artificial intelligence now, and I'm sure.
And machine learning also, because we had a session this morning where we talked about how machine learning is and artificial intelligence is coming into play in mundane, repetitive tasks in VFX.
Precisely.
So mundane, yeah, which we can do away with.
Exactly. So this is a sector which, of the promised $5 trillion economy, where we are headed to, there's a belief that $500 billion, 500 billion that is, can be contributed using AI and machine learning. But the caveat is that this will only happen if you have enough number of skilled people who can run the algorithms, who can manage the data and so on and so forth. And therefore, there's a very valid concern that there aren't enough people. And therefore, we will miss out on that $500 billion opportunity. So perhaps something similar will happen. See, one reason, again, I'm not criticizing anyone in the industry. The fact is that the pace at which advancement is happening elsewhere, technology advancement is happening elsewhere. I can share this with you. I mean, not to say that Birenda and Ashish don't know of it or you don't know of it, but I mean, just my experience that in a few years ago, I visited some great studios in the US. For instance, I went to DreamWorks. I mean, I'm meaning as a part of a delegation led by our minister. We went to DreamWorks. Electric Arts has a presence here in Hyderabad, as you would know, a long-standing presence. But their headquarters is in LA. So they were kind enough to take us to their headquarters in LA and show us around. And the kind of technology advancement which some of these companies have, I don't really see it happening too much here. Lots of work is good. For example, as many of us know now, Bahubali is today the gold standard for the best VFX that we can ever imagine coming out of India. And I'm sure everyone knows this, that all that has happened by studios based in Hyderabad. So they have also upped their game, but there is a big gulf between the small companies, mid-scale companies, their technology advancement. So I completely agree with what Virendra said, that policies cannot remain static. So while our policy has seen 5 years, and obviously typically government policies, there is a sunset clause after 5 years and we need to rewrite it. So we will be attempting to rewrite it, but while we'll retain most of the elements of the earlier version, some new things. So for example, technology advancement. So I'm now very keen that instead of giving them some few thousand rupees of rental subsidy or few thousand rupees of power bills discount, etc., I will create a fund through which, if they want to create some new, I mean, if they want to get some new software or work on some advanced technologies, those kind of things will be supported. So that is one area where I personally feel that we should, as a government, encourage the industry and the industry leaders also. Fortunately, in Hyderabad, they have a very good association. The industry has a very good association, which is called TWAGA. So I'm trying to seed this idea into this association, that look at the small and the mid-scale companies and help them move up the technology ladder. While you keep asking me to give this to them, that to them, which is fine. I agree from where are you coming into, but help them move up the technology ladder also.
Yeah, but I would also
just 1 minute, Anil. In fact, I want Jayesh Garu to give an example of T-Hub. In fact, it's the best incubator that India has created. And I once went with Jayesh Garu to T-Hub when we had the inauguration and subsequently after a year. But I could see a very interesting media and entertainment technology startups there. I think this encouragement really helps, because the objective of existing studios is so focused on delivering content that they don't go into innovation. But what T-Hub has done is, by actually getting an encouragement in creating a media and entertainment technology, that is significant. So if Jayesh Garu can talk about it, I think that happened because of the government intervention.
Yes.
May I also just request Jayesh ji to touch upon, because I think with Task, Jayesh ji, what we've created, and we have all spoken there, I've spoken there every year to, I think almost every student is connected through Task in the whole of Telangana. And it's such an amazing way to reach out to people who don't know the opportunities of a particular industry like Avgc. And therefore, that information itself makes them go back and think about, hey, there is a career here for me to think about. So I think maybe as you touch upon T-Hub, maybe a few words on Task would be greatly beneficial to the audience here.
Yeah. So thank you, Biren and Ashish ji. But I'll help all the viewers understand the context. See, these are institutions that they are talking about. T-Hub is an institution to promote innovation and entrepreneurship. Task is an institution to promote skilling and encourage students to get into good careers, meaningful careers, etc. But the reason why we create these institutions is that, see, Anil, you asked about policy. I wanted to mention this then itself, but I'm glad that I got this segue to mention it now. I was telling that in India, there are 2-3 things about policy which people typically comment adversely. One is that it's very motherhood, very aspirational, with very little understanding on the nuts and bolts. So I told you that we did it in the other way, the bottoms-up kind of an approach. The other criticism which is mentioned about Indian policies are that they read very well on paper, but nothing happens on the ground. I mean, nothing is implemented. There's a big gulf between what your intent is and what eventually happens on the ground. And one of the reasons is that no one takes responsibility for implementing it. For example, I'm the IT secretary, and I confess that I'm the IT secretary for 7 years. And but still there is a lot on my plate. So if I'm held completely personally responsible that I have to push the image policy, I mean, I may not be able to do justice. There are 20 other things that I'll have to handle at the same time. And therefore, that is the importance of these institutions. So a T-Hub is one which encourages all the innovative work which is happening in the areas of image. And now, of course, we have a center of excellence. So all the T-Hub startups have been transitioned into the image incubator. Similarly, the opportunity to understand about skills, the understanding about courses, Task is doing that. And most importantly, the third important thing to understand about Telangana's successes, that while we have these institutions, someone else can also create this institution. In our government, we are very, very clear that on most occasions, you will get better talent outside the government to run these institutions. See, our institutions are not, which are filled by this joint director, that deputy secretary, this commissioner. If you go to T-Hub, you will not find even one person from the government. If you go to the image incubator, CEO was someone, I mean, till recently, he got married and he had to move out, so can't help it. But the person whom we selected to run the image incubator, he used to work for Tencent. He used to run PUBG, and unfortunately, till it is banned, it was his baby. But the moment, that company lost its moorings in India, and he became a free bird, he learned about what is happening in Hyderabad, and he's not a Telugu, he's not a Hyderabadi. But because he understood that the government is visionary, they are serious about doing things, He applied and instantly he was selected and he ran that incubator. The other, so that is how it is, that you create institutions. First of all, you prepare a policy which is bottoms up, which is actionable. You create institutions who take responsibility for the policy. And third is that you bring the best talent from the open market. Don't rely on government resources. I'm not criticizing government resources. It's not a generalized statement that everyone is mediocre. There are good people in the government as well, but there are better people outside, is the point that I'm making. Okay. And one last thing, you may be closing it maybe in the next 5 minutes. The last thing is that we also have been successful in creating a very strong affiliation of top academic institutions to partner with all the activities which are happening in the image innovation world. So for example, in fact, it's a nice coincidence. I'm right now sitting in the campus of IIIT Hyderabad, which some of you would know is considered to be one of the best institutions in the country for computer vision, for deep tech. So this institution has a formal partnership with our T-Hub as well as with Image Incubator, and lots of new ideas related to machine vision, etc., computer vision, etc., are being promoted through our startups.
Yeah, so I wanted to add a couple of things here myself, with your permission and with Biren and Ashish's permission. See, the point is NFT universe is going to, NFT and the metaverse are going to offer opportunities for the VFX and the animation sector going forward because of digital assets that are needed. There'll be a flurry of activities. Where should this come under? Is it under IT? That's one question. Secondly, as far as VFX is concerned, because we are focusing more on VFX, the academic institutions aren't really training people very well in that area. That's a challenge this industry faces tremendously. And therefore, a lot of internal training has to happen. I mean, I'm sure Biren has an internal training exercise. I'm sure all the other studios have it. So, and you know, how we can skill these students in the sector, the newbies in this sector who are, you know, finishing schools in different companies. Those are other areas where probably support can come from government, is another area which I think could help in some way. I don't know whether Biren and Ashish want to respond.
If I may just address that, I think you raised a really important point. You know, in all content creation, the short film informs what happens in long form later because the risks are much higher as you go to TV and movies.
Yeah.
When we go sometimes to Annecy, for example, we see I see the student category of films because they are more risk averse and the things that they create today become mainstream in a few years' time. So we have the advantage of almost 80 to 90 short films we create monthly. The Super Bowl Sunday happened last Sunday, and that is the, you know, where every brand in the world wants to get the maximum exposure, and we created 39 short films for that, for the best brands in the world, and that was tremendously experimental. I wanted to add to your point by saying that in the pandemic, visual effects has created events. We had 5 of the biggest hip hop artists that we actually created for the Pepsi halftime for the Super Bowl. We've actually done stuff which is, you know, so EdTech, you know, your question about which industries, whether you take EdTech, health tech, you know, FinTech, R&D, the Dassault Aviation here, everyone here is now using artists that we train. We actually ran, to your point, 69 academies of 20 people each in the last year. That's 1,400 people, right? This year, we need to do more than that because the catchment is not available. So Indian industry, not just my company, but Indian industry carries that burden of actually paying people or, you know, spending time and spending infrastructure to first get people up to a certain speed and then be able to do what you do for your business, be it services or products or whatever the case might be. But this short film story is revolutionary because now brands are seeing film visual effects is coming in because movie making is no longer picture and sound. It's no longer that. It is multi-sensory, to the point you're making. And so understanding, you know, understanding psychology, understanding the mind, what kids want to do, the engagement, the 360 universe that we stitch imagery for is all the new world that we are in. And I think, you know, encouraging people, and I will reach out separately to Jayesh, Ranjan Garuji, and to my friends at Twaga and to other associations, We need to create lots of competitions, lots of short films that will actually help people to, come up on their own, engage with schools, etc. Because that is something which will actually promote, the long form and what we need to do with people in a bigger way, in a very practical way. That I think is a good clarion call. Maybe Anil, in time for VFX and More 2023, happy to partner with Animation Express to launch a VFX short film competition or something like that, which can be really, really powerful. Yeah,
absolutely. We are open to that idea. I'd like Ashish to respond. Yeah.
See, you mentioned about metaverse. You mentioned about NFTs.
Yeah.
I'm an advisor to one of the NFT companies from Hyderabad itself. Three youngsters from animation industry started this company called Bullion, doing extremely well. The platform they created is Viswa, the marketplaces. So we are putting together an animation production pipeline through blockchain, by the way. It requires communities, and that's why these associations are a unique feature. It's all going to come together. But more you see to the whole opportunity in the AVGC sector is that we have a film, the way it was traditionally done in the last 30 years is getting more and more share of visual effects, more and more share of technology. And the dependency on visual effects and technology has become so, so much that, earlier they used to shoot a film and they used to say, isko kuch kar do, isko enhance kar do. Aisa karke aate the, budget bhi nahi hai. Today, after intervention for last 2 decades, at least every single director and producer is pre-thinking about design of putting, Biren said, like 15% of the budget of the film. There are films which have been thought with 50% budget of visual effects. And today we have, Unreal sets and everything, which is going to further enhance the whole budget. And I think that's the key opportunity that we have. So anything and everything we do. And I went to Jayesh Ranjan Garu in 2016 with an idea of building information and modeling. Although it was about urban design and he was courteous enough to arrange all the meetings, but today BIM has gone to another level. There is building information modeling, building life cycle management. Everything requires our skills that have been honed at, with the basic of animation, the modeling itself and the simulations and everything. So I think the growth opportunity for us is immense, but whether we are matching equally at the skilling level and the education level as well, no. We are talking to universities. A good thing that has happened to India is the state private university law, which started state private universities from 2010-11. We have seen the emergence of these universities with a better infrastructure in the last 5 years. The NEP allows multidisciplinary learning, and I think that's something which is going to help us. But one request to all the people, and especially I would require help from Jayesh Ranjan Garu, like he has done the task, and we have done several meetings at task itself. We need an intervention at a school level, because the creative skills and performing art skills and the design thinking, if happens at that level, the career making happens much better. And today's kids are well exposed to the through media to all these things. It will become easier for us to grow and groom them into our sectors.
And digital has accelerated this for kids, and gaming has accelerated this, as well as the Marvel films which have come out, which have become an absolute fascination for young children.
Absolutely. So this is one thing that we need to do as a conscious effort, and you will see in the next 5-6 years the results will start showing up once we start this talent. But I think the way industry has put efforts in training and giving them salaries as well, hats off, because many countries can't think of a production if you don't have a government funding. We still are entrepreneurial in thinking, okay, if there is no co-production, we'll still do a co-production. If there is no funding, we'll still produce content. So services has taken precedence because the revenue is made from there. But I really salute the complete inspiration and the gut feel and the passion of our creative talent in this country. that once they found a way, they don't stop, and they really do. And I think if we can have a clone of Jayesh Ranjan Garu in every state.
And let's use 3D printers. Let's use 3D printers. Come on, are you open to 3D printing, Jayesh?
Those emotions have to come, no, boss.
I know. So let's have last words, because we have to get on to the next session. Jayesh,
Sure.
last words.
No, so I mean, I'm glad that we are having this conversation, because this is a very opportune time for all of us. As all of us know, a very important announcement has been made in the budget this year, which also shows that government has finally recognized the value of this industry. And during the COVID time also, as you would recall, during this phase when Atmanirbhar was introduced, there was an apprehension that lots of apps, etc., belonging to other countries are becoming popular. So there was a ban. But at the same time, it was felt that to fill up this vacuum, we must encourage local talent. So thinking has started. And those states which are already into this business, who have good policies, who have a good execution track record. See, both of you, Biren represents head CII's vertical. Ashish is in FICCI. You represent a very important media and publication group. My suggestion would be that while it is very nice to democratize everything, but let us also bet big on those states where there is a seriousness of purpose.
Yes.
I mean, India has 28 states and 6 union territories. So I wanted to comment on that also, that it serves no purpose to say that I'll ensure that there is one center of excellence on ABCG in every state, every union territory. Eventually, you'll be only trying to boil the ocean without getting anything. So let us say pick top 3 states, top 5 states, and then support them and encourage how best they can take up their game to match the best in the world. You spoke about Korea, you spoke about France. These are the countries with whom we also have engagements, and we really appreciate. I really value some of the great things which they do. And I'm always pushing the local industry also to engage more with these. So I guess this is the right time for us to consolidate our thoughts and show this common front and common vision to the government of India.
Fantastic. So Biren, your last words.
I would always say that I think a session like this is about lighting candles and not cursing the darkness. I think we've done, we shouldn't take away the credit for the fact that we have really catapulted the entire production industry through visual effects, both in the global as well as the local market. It might just be an ingredient, a secret sauce in all content creation, but it's a very valuable one because it adds scale and opportunity to everything that people do. It goes beyond the camera. I do feel that, there is a momentum which has best practices. I think the industry in visual effects, more than we've ever seen in animation, for example, before, is highly connected. On an average, I can't mention them for reasons of confidentiality. On an average, we work with 15 to 17 other studios in India every day. We actually give, and so somewhere between 500 to 600 to 700 man days of work takes place outside. And this is what an ecosystem play is all about. And today with breakaways, that people that have gone back to Assam or gone back to, to Jharkhand are forming groups of 5 and 10 and 15 people. And while Jayesh ji is quite right that we can have strong hubs in north, south, east, west, and central, we don't have to boil the ocean. But at the same time, these hubs can then become, places which can connect to between a 10 or even 100 locations in time to come. And that is the network effect I talked about earlier. And that network effect, it can actually happen now because of the community of people who work in visual effects, driven by the visual effects supervisor. So let's go back to the movie making days. We used to know the director and we used to know, the producer. But today there's a third pillar in that, which is the visual effects supervisor. And looking forward to the visual effects supervisor award, which we are giving this evening, because that person is the captain of the ship when it comes to VFX and more. And I think that community needs to be grown. We have too few supervisors. We have too few, people who are, in the senior position. If we have 20 more visual effects supervisors per month coming out from north, south, east, and west, this whole story will multiply because people need leaders and mentors to grow the teams under them. So I think that's a very important part of what we should do as industry. And I don't think it's about finger pointing, government should do this or industry should do this or academia should do this. I think we're now grown up enough to sit together and do it all together.
Fantastic. Ashish, I'd like to just step in and say, I think also states can specialize in certain areas. In France, certain provinces are very good in audio. Certain provinces are good in previs, certain provinces. So we can start specializing with states so that there is a competitive factor, but there's also specializations. Over to you, Ashish, now, your last words.
I think, Anil, I think where we are driving is that you talked about the competitive factor. I think it's a good sign that there is a competitive factor that has come in. There's a good sign that the university and academia at large is trying to recognize that there is a need of doing this, and the industry is very keen to work with them. The situation is very different. It will be great if the school's education also works onto this. But more than anything else, I think it is laying a great foundation for India to invite the world to really look at using the best talent in time to come. And also look at the cost factor, because every film or every product that comes in is all about the cost of where and how much cost you feel and what benchmark you can set. And I think the technology part, which is little disconnected at this point in time, needs to actually go through the education area, where the government will also have to intervene a little bit, because there was no precedence into the school education and the university. And then you say that for teaching a master's program, you need a PhD. When we don't have a graduate, how will I get a PhD? For me, the PhD is, Rajamouli is my PhD. Rajkumar Hirani is my PhD. Now, how do we get a recognition for these kind of things is something that we need to work together with the government. That this is also, a framework. Even a rural artist who is established in art form or does a tribal art in a very different way or does a Tanjore art, they should actually have a PhD of a different kind. So we should get away a little bit, and that's where the government intervention would be required. And I think once we educate each other and work with thing as an industry together, I think we would definitely achieve it, because I'm very sure that we are the only country which offers every artist an opportunity to look at a content from any language, and they don't have to go to a different country for that. They can look at it within their country. We need to only sensitize them and encourage them to look at that. At the same time, look at different technologies to be adapted, not get over bogged by the technology, but get overwhelmed by the creative aspect of it. And I'm sure we will be able to drive this point for all the stakeholders in time to come. And I can't resist thanking you for doing this wonderful sessions. I remember the last year's session, the fireside chat on VFX, which is still, people write to us about it. And I think even this session is going to be looked at in a very different way. And I think setting these examples and benchmark that has been created in Telangana, in Karnataka, and now you will see the smaller states creating it.
No, I'm just hoping Maharashtra moves up. Maharashtra is really slow. I'm sorry to say.
Maharashtra, the challenge is that they have still put it under the industries ministry. Yeah. And that's where the heavy industry takes, and automobile industry takes away, and the IT also takes away a lot of chunk. So unless and until the segregation of the ministry happens, you don't get a right focus.
No, I'm happy. Kerala is doing well. I believe Kerala is doing well, but Maharashtra is
because it's because it's under the industry.
I know. We need to move that. We need to move that.
Yeah. So we should do a separate session with them.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for this. We are 15 minutes late. I'm getting Prerna shouting at me on the chat. Thank you, Jayesh, and thank you, Ashish and Biren. We move on to the next session now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.